I found the letter taped to my trash can on a Tuesday morning in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, and it made my blood pressure spike before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. The crisp white paper with the Sunset Ridge HOA letterhead fluttered in the desert breeze, held in place by what looked like 3 layers of packing tape, wrapped around the handle of my dark green bin like someone had been afraid I might miss it. My name is Quentin Keller, and I had lived in this planned community for exactly 8 months. 8 peaceful, quiet months where I mowed my lawn on schedule, painted my mailbox the approved shade of bronze, and kept my trash cans exactly where the previous owner had kept them for 15 years. The spot in question was a narrow alcove on the side of my house, barely visible from the street, tucked between my garage wall and a decorative block wall that separated my property from my neighbor's yard. The trash can sat on a concrete pad that had been poured specifically for that purpose, complete with a small drain for when you needed to hose them down. The letter was signed by Brenda Hutchinson, the HOA president, and it demanded that I relocate my trash cans to my backyard within 72 hours or face a fine of $50 per day. The reasoning, according to her 3-paragraph manifesto, was that trash cans visible from any angle of the street were in violation of the community's aesthetic standards. She had underlined the word aesthetic twice and written eyesore in red ink in the margin. I read the letter 3 times standing in my driveway in my work clothes, my briefcase still in my other hand. The Arizona sun was already climbing toward 90 degrees, even though it was only 7:30 in the morning. I worked as a systems analyst for a telecommunications company downtown, and I was supposed to be on the road already, but this letter had derailed my entire morning routine. The thing was, my trash cans were not visible from the street. You had to walk up my driveway and crane your neck to the left to even catch a glimpse of them. I had specifically checked the HOA covenants before I bought the house, and there was nothing in the rules about trash can placement beyond the requirement that they not be left at the curb, except on collection days. I kept mine tucked away in their little alcove, brought them out Monday nights for the Tuesday morning pickup, and rolled them back by Tuesday evening like clockwork. I pulled out my phone and took several pictures of the letter, then carefully peeled it off the trash can. The adhesive left sticky residue on the handle that would probably attract ants, which irritated me even more. I folded the letter, stuck it in my briefcase, and decided I would deal with this after work. I had a meeting at 9 that I could not miss, and Brenda Hutchinson was going to have to wait. The drive downtown gave me time to think. I had heard stories about aggressive HOAs before I bought the house, horror stories really, but the real estate agent had assured me that Sunset Ridge was one of the more reasonable communities. The dues were only $60 a month, which covered landscaping for the common areas and maintenance of the community pool and ramada. The rules seemed straightforward. No boats or RVs parked in driveways. No front yard vegetable gardens. Keep your grass green and your weeds pulled. Standard stuff for a Phoenix suburb. But now Brenda was inventing rules that did not exist, and I needed to figure out why. My next-door neighbor, an older retired gentleman named Frank Morrison, had his trash cans in almost the exact same spot, just on the other side of that shared block wall. Had he gotten a letter too? Or was I being specifically targeted? Work was a blur of meetings and emails, but I managed to focus enough to get through my tasks. During my lunch break, I pulled out my phone and called the City of Phoenix Code Enforcement Office. If Brenda was going to cite aesthetics and community standards, I wanted to know what the actual legal requirements were for trash can storage in the city limits. The woman who answered the phone had a pleasant voice and an efficient manner. Code enforcement. This is Teresa speaking. Hi, Teresa. My name is Quentin Keller, and I have a question about trash can storage requirements for residential properties. Sure, I can help with that. What is your address? I gave her my street address in the Sunset Ridge community, and I heard her typing. Okay, I have got your property pulled up. What is your specific question? My HOA is demanding that I move my trash cans from the side of my house to my backyard. They are currently on a concrete pad in an alcove that is barely visible from the street. Is there any city code that would require me to move them? Teresa was quiet for a moment, more typing sounds. No, there is no city code requiring trash cans to be stored in backyards. The only requirements we have are that trash cans cannot be left at the curb, except within 24 hours of scheduled pickup time, and they cannot be stored in a way that creates a health or safety hazard. If your cans are on your property, not blocking access and not creating an unsanitary condition, you are in compliance with city code. So if I keep them where they are, I am not violating any laws, correct? However, HOA rules can be more restrictive than city codes. If your HOA has specific rules about trash can storage in their covenants, conditions, and restrictions, those would still apply to you. I have read the CC and Articus, and there is nothing specific about where trash cans should be stored, just that they cannot be left at the curb except on pickup days. Teresa made a thoughtful sound. Then, I would suggest you document that and respond to your HOA in writing. If they want to enforce a rule, it needs to be actually written in your governing documents. Would you like me to send an inspector out to verify that your current storage location is code compliant? That way you would have official documentation. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Yes, that would be incredibly helpful. Let me get you scheduled. How about tomorrow afternoon around 2? Will you be home? I can make myself available. This is important enough to take an extended lunch break. Perfect. Inspector Martinez will meet you at your property at 2 tomorrow afternoon. He will assess your trash can storage area and provide you with a written statement of compliance if everything is in order. I thanked her profusely and hung up feeling significantly better. I had official city code enforcement on my side. Whatever Brenda thought she could enforce, she was going to run into the brick wall of actual municipal regulations. That evening, I knocked on Frank Morrison's door. Frank answered wearing cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, a glass of iced tea in his hand. He was probably in his late 60s, with white hair and a perpetual tan from years in the Arizona sun. Quentin, what can I do for you? Did you get a letter from the HOA about your trash cans? Frank's expression immediately soured. Oh, so you got one too? Yeah, I found that nonsense taped to my can this morning. Brenda has lost her mind. You know her, unfortunately. She moved into the neighborhood about a year ago and immediately ran for HOA president. One, because nobody else wanted the job. She has been making everyone miserable ever since, trying to impose all these rules that are not actually in our documents. What have you done about the letter? Frank took a sip of his tea and gestured for me to come inside. His house had the same floor plan as mine but mirrored, and it was decorated with southwestern art and comfortable leather furniture. We sat in his living room while he told me the saga of Brenda Hutchinson. According to Frank, Brenda had moved to Sunset Ridge from a gated community in Scottsdale, where the HOA rules were apparently draconian. She seemed to believe that our neighborhood should operate the same way, with constant inspections, aggressive enforcement, and mounting fines for minor infractions. In the past year, she had tried to force 3 different homeowners to repaint their houses, because the beige they had chosen was not the exact approved shade, despite those homes having had the same paint for over a decade. She had attempted to ban children from playing in the street. She had tried to implement assigned parking at the community pool. The problem, Frank said, leaning back in his recliner, is that most people just do whatever she says because they do not want the hassle. She counts on that. She sends these threatening letters knowing that maybe half the people will comply immediately just to avoid conflict. But the rules have to actually be written down, right? She cannot just make things up. That is the thing. She thinks that because she is president, she can interpret the CC and Articus however she wants, and our HOA board is basically useless. There are 5 board members total including her, and 2 of them are her friends from her old neighborhood who bought houses here after she became president. The other 2 are older folks who barely show up to meetings. So what are you going to do about the trash can letter? Frank grinned. I am going to ignore it. Let her fine me. I will take her to small claims court if I have to. I have already talked to 3 other people on our street who got the same letter, and we are all planning to refuse. I told Frank about my call to code enforcement and the inspector coming the next day. His grin got wider. Oh, that is perfect. Get that in writing. If the city says your cans are fine where they are, Brenda cannot do a thing about it. Mind if I get a copy of that report when you get it? Absolutely. We should coordinate on this. We exchanged phone numbers, and I went home feeling like I had an ally. The situation was ridiculous, but at least I was not dealing with it alone. Inspector Martinez arrived right on time the next day. He was a stocky Hispanic man in his 40s with a no-nonsense attitude and a clipboard thick with forms. I met him in my driveway and walked him around to the side of the house where my trash cans lived. He spent maybe 2 minutes looking at the setup. He measured the distance from the street using a laser measuring tool. He took photos with a city-issued camera. He checked that the cans were not blocking any access points or creating any kind of hazard. Then he pulled out a form and started filling it in. Mr. Keller, your trash can storage area is fully compliant with all Phoenix City codes. The cans are on your private property. They are not visible from the primary street view. They are not creating any obstruction or health hazard, and they are stored on an appropriate surface with drainage. You are not in violation of any municipal codes. Can you put that in writing for me? That is what this form is for. He finished writing, signed, and dated it, then tore off a yellow carbon copy and handed it to me. Keep this for your records. If your HOA gives you any trouble, you can show them this documentation. They cannot enforce a rule that contradicts city code, and they cannot force you to comply with a rule that does not exist in your governing documents. What if they try to fine me anyway? Inspector Martinez gave me a sympathetic look. Unfortunately, HOA disputes are civil matters. If they fine you and you believe the fine is unjust, you would need to handle that through the courts. However, having this documentation will help your case significantly. Most judges do not look kindly on HOAs that try to enforce imaginary rules. I thanked him and he left. I immediately scanned the compliance letter with my phone and emailed copies to myself and to Frank. Then I sat down at my computer and drafted a response to Brenda's demand letter. I kept it professional and factual. I stated that I had reviewed the Sunset Ridge HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and found no specific requirement for trash cans to be stored in backyards. I noted that my current storage location complied with all city codes, as verified by the Phoenix Code Enforcement Office, and I attached a copy of Inspector Martinez's compliance letter. I concluded by stating that I would not be relocating my trash cans. unless the HOA could provide specific documentation of a rule I was violating. I printed 3 copies of the letter, put one in an envelope addressed to Brenda Hutchinson at the HOA mailing address, kept one for my files, and scanned one to PDF. Then, I drove to the post office and sent the letter via certified mail so I would have proof of delivery. 3 days passed. Garbage day came and went. I put my cans out Monday night and brought them back Tuesday evening, same as always. Thursday afternoon, I found another letter taped to my trash can. This one was even more aggressive. Brenda claimed that I was in willful violation of community standards, and that fines would begin accruing immediately at $50 per day. She stated that the HOA board had voted to enforce visual harmony in the neighborhood, and that trash cans visible from any angle constituted a violation of that standard. She included a grainy photograph of my cans taken from what must have been the far edge of my property line, an angle that no reasonable person would ever view the house from unless they were deliberately trying to see the trash cans. I was angry now. This was not about aesthetics or community standards. This was about control and power. Brenda wanted compliance, and she did not care whether the rules actually supported her demands. I called Frank immediately. He had received an identical letter. "She is bluffing," Frank said. "She cannot fine us for violating a rule that does not exist. Let her try." "What about the other people on the street you mentioned?" "I've been talking to them. 2 caved and moved their cans. One is holding firm with us. That is the Rodriguez's 3 houses down from you. Nice family. Hugo told me he is not moving his cans on principle. We should all meet, compare notes, maybe figure out our next steps together." Frank agreed, and we set up a meeting for Saturday morning at his house. In the meantime, I did something I probably should have done earlier. I requested a copy of the most recent HOA board meeting minutes from the management company that handled our community's administrative tasks. The management company was called Desert Communities Management, and they were based in Tempe. I called them Friday morning and explained that I needed copies of all board meeting minutes from the past year. The woman I spoke to, whose name was Linda, sounded tired. "You are the 4th person this week asking for meeting minutes," she said. "What is going on over there?" "HOA president is trying to enforce rules that do not exist. We need documentation to fight back." Linda sighed. "I can get you the minutes, but I will tell you right now, there has not been a board vote on trash can placement. Brenda submitted a proposal about it 2 months ago, but it did not have enough support. She needed a majority of the board to approve any new rules, and she only got 2 votes, including her own." My heart rate picked up. So she is trying to enforce a rule that the board did not even approve. I cannot comment on internal HOA business, but I can send you the minutes that show what was actually voted on. Give me your email. I gave her my email address, and within an hour I had PDF files of every board meeting from the past 18 months. I sat at my kitchen table reading through them, taking notes. The picture that emerged was damning. Brenda had proposed 12 different rule changes since becoming president. Only 3 had passed, and those were minor things like updating the pool hours and changing the landscaping company. Every single one of her more aggressive proposals, including trash can restrictions, front yard decoration limits, and mandatory exterior repainting schedules, had failed to get board approval. But according to the minutes, she had been sending enforcement letters anyway, acting as though her proposals had passed. This was not just aggressive. This was fraudulent. She was deliberately misleading homeowners into believing they were violating rules that the HOA had never actually approved. Saturday morning, Frank, Hugo Rodriguez, and I met in Frank's living room. Hugo was a friendly guy in his mid-30s who worked as an engineer for one of the aerospace companies in the area. His wife, Amelia, had stayed home with their kids, but Hugo came armed with his own documentation. He had pulled the original CC and Articus from when the neighborhood was developed in 2008, and he had compared them to the current version on file with the county. "Nothing has changed," Hugo said, spreading papers across Frank's coffee table. "The language about trash cans is identical. They cannot be left at the curb except on collection day. That is it. There is nothing about where they have to be stored on your property." I showed them the board meeting minutes I had received from Desert Communities Management. Frank let out a low whistle when he read through them. "She has been running a scam," Frank said. "How many people do you think have complied with her fake rules?" "I did some asking around," Hugo said. "In the last year, at least 20 homeowners have repainted, relocated trash cans, removed decorations, or made other changes based on Brenda's letters. Most people did not realize they could push back. We need to bring this to the full board," I said. "If the other board members know she is sending enforcement letters for rules that were never approved, they have to do something." "Two of the other board members are her friends," Frank reminded me. "But the other two might listen. There is Gerald Thompson and Patricia Liu. They have been on the board for years. They might not know what Brenda has been doing." We decided our strategy. We would request a special board meeting to address the trash can issue specifically. We would present our documentation, including the city code enforcement letter, the board meeting minutes showing no approval of trash can rules, and the original CC and Articus. We would demand that Brenda stop sending enforcement letters for non-existent violations, and we would ask the board to formally clarify the actual rules in writing. Hugo volunteered to draft the request for the special meeting. According to the HOA bylaws, any 3 homeowners could request a special meeting, and the board was required to hold it within 30 days. We all signed the request, and Hugo Hand delivered it to Desert Communities Management on Monday. In the meantime, the situation escalated. Tuesday afternoon, I came home from work to find a bright orange violation notice sticker plastered across my trash can. It stated that I was in continued violation of HOA standards, and that fines were now at $350, representing 7 days at $50 per day. I took a photo of the sticker, peeled it off, and threw it in my recycling bin. Then I sat down and calculated how this was going to play out. If Brenda tried to actually collect these fines, she would have to go through proper channels. According to the HOA bylaws, fines could only be assessed after a hearing where the homeowner had the opportunity to present their case. She could not just send letters and expect people to pay. The special board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening 3 weeks out, the earliest date when all 5 board members could attend. That gave Brenda 3 more weeks to continue her harassment campaign, and she took full advantage of it. Every few days, a new letter appeared taped to my trash can. The fine amounts increased. By the time the board meeting rolled around, Brenda claimed I owed the HOA $1,400. Frank and Hugo had similar letters with similarly absurd fine amounts, but we had been busy too. Hugo had contacted every homeowner in the neighborhood who had received enforcement letters from Brenda in the past year. Out of 47 homes in Sunset Ridge, 23 had received at least one enforcement letter, and 18 of those letters had been for violations that were not actually in the CC and Articus. We compiled a spreadsheet with dates, alleged violations, and outcomes. The pattern of Brenda making up rules was undeniable. The special board meeting was held in the community Ramada near the pool. It was a warm evening in May, with the sun just starting to set behind the desert mountains to the west. About 30 homeowners showed up, which was apparently a record for HOA meeting attendance. Most meetings drew maybe 5 or 6 people. The 5 board members sat at a folding table at the front. Brenda Hutchinson was exactly what I expected. A woman probably in her early 50s with aggressively blonde hair styled in a helmet like Bob, wearing too much jewelry and a pinched expression like she had been sucking on lemons. Her 2 friends on the board, Karen Winters and Susan Palmer, flanked her like bodyguards. They looked like they could have been sisters, both with the same expensive athleisure wear and oversized sunglasses perched on their heads despite the evening hour. Gerald Thompson and Patricia Liu sat at the far end of the table looking uncomfortable. Gerald was an older black man with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing a golf polo. Patricia was a Chinese-American woman probably in her 60s, dressed professionally in slacks and a blouse. Brenda called the meeting to order and immediately tried to control the narrative. This special meeting was requested to address some confusion about our community standards. I want to assure everyone that the board is simply trying to maintain the beautiful appearance of Sunset Ridge and protect everyone's property values. Frank stood up. Brenda, with all due respect, there is no confusion. The issue is that you have been sending enforcement letters for violations that do not exist in our governing documents. Brenda's face flushed. Our CC and Articus give the board broad authority to maintain community standards. They give you authority to enforce the rules that are written, Hugo said, standing up beside Frank. They do not give you authority to make up new rules without board approval. I stood and held up the folder I had prepared. I have copies of board meeting minutes from the past 18 months. They show that multiple rule proposals, including restrictions on trash can placement, were brought to the board and failed to get majority approval. Yet enforcement letters for these same non-approved rules have been sent to homeowners. The room erupted in conversation. Other homeowners started standing, several of them angry, holding their own enforcement letters. Patricia Liu leaned forward, her expression troubled. Brenda, is this true? Have you been sending enforcement letters without board approval? I have been exercising my authority as president to interpret our standards, Brenda said, her voice tight. The board gave me authority to handle day-to-day enforcement. Show me where the board voted on trash can placement, Gerald Thompson said, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. If we voted on it, it will be in the minutes. Brenda shuffled papers, her face getting redder. Karen and Susan whispered to each other, looking nervous. I walked up to the table and handed copies of the relevant board minutes to Gerald and Patricia. There, I said, pointing to the section from March. Brenda proposed requiring all trash cans to be stored in backyards or garages. The vote was 2 in favor, 3 opposed. It did not pass. Patricia read the minutes carefully, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she looked at Brenda. You proposed this rule and it was rejected by the board. Why did you send enforcement letters anyway? I felt it was important for our community's appearance, Brenda said, but her voice wavered. I was trying to do what was best. That is not how HOAs work, Gerald said, his voice firm but not unkind. You cannot enforce rules that do not exist. You cannot bypass the board's decision-making process. The meeting devolved into chaos for several minutes. Homeowners were standing, shouting questions and complaints. It came out that Brenda had collected thousands of dollars in fines from various homeowners over the past year for violations that were never legitimate. Some people had paid the fines just to make the harassment stop. Others had made expensive changes to their properties based on her demands. A woman I did not know stood up near the back. I paid $800 to have my front yard replanted because Brenda said my roses were not an approved variety. Are you telling me that was not actually a rule? Patricia looked through more of the documents, her expression increasingly dismayed. There is nothing in our landscape requirements about specific plant varieties. There is just a general requirement to maintain a neat appearance. The anger in the room was palpable. Frank looked at me and nodded. This was the moment we had been building toward. I moved that the board formally reject all enforcement letters and fines issued by Brenda Hutchinson that were not based on rules explicitly stated in our CC and Articus, I said, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. Furthermore, I move that the board require any collected fines for these non-existent violations to be refunded to homeowners. I second that motion, Hugo called out. Gerald looked at Patricia, and some silent communication passed between them. Then Gerald addressed the room. As board members, Patricia and I have a fiduciary duty to this HOA. If what is being presented here is accurate, and it appears to be, then serious procedural violations have occurred. I support the motion to reject invalid fines and issue refunds. I also support it, Patricia said. Brenda stood up abruptly. You cannot do this. I am the president of this HOA. And as president, you are supposed to follow the rules, Gerald said. Let's vote. All in favor of rejecting invalid enforcement letters and fines. Gerald and Patricia raised their hands. After a moment of hesitation, Susan Palmer raised hers too. Karen Winters looked at Brenda, then reluctantly raised her hand as well. Motion passes 4-1, Gerald said. Brenda, you are outvoted. But Brenda was not done. Over the next 3 days, she launched a desperate counterattack. She sent emails to the entire neighborhood claiming that the board had acted illegally, that the special meeting had been a kangaroo court, and that she was taking legal action to protect the HOA's authority. She sent another round of enforcement letters, these ones threatening immediate legal action if fines were not paid within 48 hours. That was when she made her biggest mistake. In her fury and desperation to reassert control, Brenda started accessing homeowners' private information without authorization. She pulled property records, mortgage information, and even credit reports on several homeowners, including me. She included details from these reports in threatening letters, apparently trying to intimidate people by showing that she knew their financial situations. I discovered this when I received a letter from Brenda that mentioned my exact mortgage balance and the name of my loan officer. There was no legitimate reason for her to have that information, and no legal way she should have been able to access it. I called my mortgage company immediately, and they confirmed that someone had pulled my credit report using HOA-related credentials. That was identity theft. That was fraud. That was a crime. I called Frank and Hugo. They had received similar letters with private financial details. We conference called with several other homeowners who had gotten the same treatment. 8 of us total had been targeted with Brenda's illegal information gathering. Monday morning, I took the day off work and drove to the Phoenix Police Department's North Precinct on Cave Creek Road. I brought every piece of documentation I had: the enforcement letters, the credit report pulls, the board meeting minutes, everything. The officer at the front desk listened to my explanation and directed me to the Economic Crimes Unit. Detective Sarah Chen met with me in a small interview room. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. I laid out everything on the table, and she listened carefully, taking notes. So this HOA president illegally accessed your credit report and those of 7 other homeowners. That is correct. She used the information to try to intimidate us into paying fines that were not legitimate in the first place. Detective Chen picked up one of Brenda's letters and read it carefully. These details about your mortgage, she could not have gotten this from public records. She would have needed your social security number to pull a credit report, which she would have had access to through the HOA management company records. When you buy into the HOA, you provide personal information for dues payment and contact purposes. And she misused that information for unauthorized purposes. Detective Chen made more notes. This is identity theft under Arizona Revised Statute 13-2008. It is also fraud. If she accessed credit reports without a permissible purpose, she violated the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is federal. Let me get statements from the other victims. Over the next 2 days, Detective Chen interviewed Frank, Hugo, and the 5 other homeowners who had received letters containing illegally obtained financial information. She also subpoenaed records from Desert Communities Management and from the credit reporting agencies. The paper trail was clear and damning. Thursday afternoon, Detective Chen and 2 uniformed officers arrested Brenda Hutchinson at her home. According to Frank, who heard it from a neighbor who witnessed it, Brenda screamed that this was a conspiracy and that she was being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards. The police were unmoved. She was booked on 8 counts of identity theft and multiple fraud charges. The story made the local news. HOA president arrested for identity theft was the headline on the Phoenix ABC affiliate's evening broadcast. They interviewed several Sunset Ridge residents, including Hugo, who calmly explained the situation. The reporter made it sound appropriately scandalous, which it was. The fallout was swift. Desert Communities Management immediately severed all ties with Brenda and recommended that the Sunset Ridge HOA board remove her from the presidency. Karen Winters and Susan Palmer, her 2 allies on the board, resigned within 24 hours, apparently not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Gerald Thompson was named interim president, and Patricia Liu took on increased responsibilities. An emergency board meeting was called to address the leadership vacuum. Elections were scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, Gerald and Patricia worked with Desert Communities Management to identify every invalid enforcement letter and fine from the past year. They sent formal apology letters to all affected homeowners and issued refunds totaling over $18,000. The criminal case against Brenda moved through the system. Her lawyer tried to argue that accessing the credit reports had been a mistake, that she had not understood the legal boundaries of her authority as HOA president. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Victoria Harris, was having none of it. She knew exactly what she was doing, Victoria Harris said during a hearing I attended in July. She deliberately accessed private financial information without authorization for the purpose of intimidating and coercing residents into compliance with rules that did not exist. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated pattern of illegal behavior. In August, Brenda took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts of identity theft and 2 counts of fraud. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of early release for good behavior after serving a minimum of 9 months. She was also ordered to pay restitution to all 8 victims whose information she had illegally accessed, covering not just the fraudulent fines, but also credit monitoring services and compensation for emotional distress. My share came to just over $3,000. Additionally, Brenda was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona and was required to complete courses on ethics and legal compliance as part of her probation conditions after release. The HOA moved forward without her. New board elections in September brought in reasonable people who actually understood their role. A retired lawyer named Marcus Washington became president, and he immediately set about updating and clarifying all the community rules. Every single covenant was reviewed, ambiguous language was clarified, and a new enforcement policy was put in place requiring board votes before any fines could be assessed. My trash cans stayed exactly where they had always been, in their little alcove between my garage and the block wall, sitting on their concrete pad. Nobody bothered them. Nobody sent threatening letters. They were just trash cans doing their job, holding my garbage until collection day. Frank and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We had barbecues in each other's backyards and complained about Phoenix summer heat over cold beers. Hugo and his family became part of our little group too. We joked about forming a support group for HOA harassment survivors. The neighborhood felt different after everything settled. People were more engaged, more willing to speak up when something did not seem right. Attendance at HOA meetings increased dramatically. The community pool got some much-needed renovations using money that had been sitting in the HOA reserves. The landscaping improved. Ironically, Sunset Ridge actually became a nicer place to live once people stopped being afraid of their own HOA. I still think about the absurdity of the whole situation sometimes. A trash can. All that drama, all that conflict, criminal charges, and prison time over a trash can that was exactly where it was supposed to be. But it was never really about the trash can. It was about power and control, about someone who thought rules were whatever she said they were, about the belief that a position of minor authority gave her the right to bully and intimidate her neighbors. The truth is, HOAs serve an important function when they operate correctly. They maintain common areas, they provide amenities, they help preserve property values, but they can also be vehicles for petty tyrants if nobody pushes back. The system only works when homeowners stay informed, know their rights, and are willing to stand up to abuse. I learned a lot through the experience. I learned to read the fine print, to document everything, to get official confirmation when something seems wrong. I learned that standing up to bullies is worth the effort, even when it is stressful and time-consuming. And I learned that you are usually not alone. When one person is being unreasonable and aggressive, there are usually other victims willing to band together if someone takes the first step. My trash cans sit in their alcove today, exactly where they were when I bought the house, exactly where the city code enforcement inspector confirmed they were perfectly fine. They are green plastic bins with wheels and handles, nothing special, nothing controversial. On Monday nights, I roll them out to the curb. On Tuesday evenings, I roll them back. The system works. Sometimes I drive past the house where Brenda used to live. A nice young couple bought it after she went to prison and had to sell. They have a toddler who plays in the front yard, and they keep their trash cans in the same side alcove that Brenda had demanded everyone abandon. The irony is not lost on me. The Phoenix summer rolled into fall, and life in Sunset Ridge continued in its peaceful, ordinary way. Marcus Washington proved to be an excellent HOA president, the kind of boring, competent leader that every community needs. He sent monthly emails with updates on community projects. He mediated the occasional neighbor dispute, and he made sure the budget was transparent and properly allocated. Under his leadership, the HOA was exactly what it should be. A functional administrative body that maintained common areas and stayed out of everyone's business unless absolutely necessary. The trash can issue never came up again. In fact, At one of the monthly board meetings in October, Marcus proposed formally updating the CC and Articus to explicitly state that homeowners could store trash cans anywhere on their property that was not visible from the primary street view, with a clear definition of what primary street view meant. The proposal passed unanimously, and just like that, the rule was official. My trash cans and everyone else's were grandfathered in, protected by actual written policy instead of the whims of whoever happened to be in charge. I ran into Detective Chen a few months later at a coffee shop downtown. She remembered the case immediately. "The HOA trash can case," she said with a slight headshake and a wry expression. "That was one of the stranger identity theft cases I have worked. Usually, it is stolen credit cards or online scams, but using HOA records to intimidate people about garbage cans. That was a new one. How often do you see HOA disputes turn criminal?" I asked. "More often than you would think," she said. "Usually it is embezzlement, though. Board members or management companies skimming money from reserves. Identity theft is rare, but HOAs can bring out the worst in people. You give someone a little bit of power and no oversight, and some of them go crazy with it." We talked for a few more minutes, and she told me that Brenda's case had actually led to some policy changes in how HOAs were monitored in Maricopa County. There was now increased scrutiny on management companies, more requirements for financial transparency, and clearer guidelines about what information HOA board members could access, and for what purposes. One abusive HOA president had inadvertently made the system a little bit better for everyone. By December, Sunset Ridge was fully recovered from the Brenda era. The community Christmas party was well attended and actually fun. Kids played in the pool area while adults mingled and talked about normal things like work and sports and holiday plans. Nobody mentioned enforcement letters or fines or trash cans. Frank hosted a New Year's party at his house, and most of the street showed up. At one point, standing on his back patio with a drink in my hand and watching fireworks pop in the distance over the Phoenix skyline, Hugo raised his beer bottle in a toast. "To trash cans," he said with a grin. "May they forever rest in peace in their side yard alcoves." We all laughed and drank to that. It was absurd and perfect, and exactly the kind of closure the situation deserved. The legal case wrapped up completely in February. Brenda had been in prison for 6 months, and according to the public records, she was a model inmate likely to get early release. She would have another 3 months to serve, then probation. Her lawyer had apparently advised her to keep her head down and not cause any more trouble. She had lost her house, her position, her reputation, and her freedom. There was nothing left to fight for. The restitution checks arrived in March. $3,247 made out to me from the Arizona Department of Corrections Victims Compensation Fund. I deposited it and used part of it to buy a really nice new gas grill for my backyard. Frank thought that was hilarious. "You bought a grill with your identity theft money from the HOA president who went to prison over your trash cans. That is the most Phoenix thing I have ever heard." He was not wrong. Life continued. I got a promotion at work. Frank retired fully and started spending winters in California visiting his grandkids. Hugo's wife had another baby, a girl they named Sophia. The neighborhood kids rode bikes in the street on warm evenings. Dogs barked. Sprinklers hissed in the early mornings before the heat got too intense. The HOA sent occasional reminders about pool rules and landscaping schedules. Everything was normal, functional, boring in the best possible way. My trash cans sat in their alcove, unbothered and unremarkable. Green plastic bins on a concrete pad, holding garbage, doing their job. Nobody wrote letters about them. Nobody took photos from weird angles trying to prove they were visible. Nobody claimed they violated aesthetic standards or community harmony or property values. They were just trash cans, as they should be, as they always were. And somewhere, in a minimum security facility in Arizona, a former HOA president named Brenda Hutchinson was learning that not everything needs to be controlled, that not every battle needs to be fought, and that sometimes the rules you try to enforce can end up enforcing something on you instead. I did not feel particularly triumphant about any of it. I had not set out to send anyone to prison. I had just wanted to keep my trash cans where they had always been, where they worked perfectly well, where the city said they were fine. But when someone chooses to escalate a minor dispute into harassment, and then into criminal behavior, the consequences are their own responsibility. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up for yourself, about knowing when to fight and when to walk away, about the difference between reasonable rules and arbitrary power. HOAs are necessary in many communities, but they work best when everyone remembers that they exist to serve the homeowners, not the other way around. My name is Quentin Keller. I live at Sunset Ridge in Phoenix, Arizona. My trash cans are stored in a side yard alcove on a concrete pad with drainage, barely visible from the street, fully compliant with all city codes and HOA regulations. They are collected every Tuesday morning, and I bring them back in every Tuesday evening. And that is exactly how it should be.